Hi, my name's Triphosphate, and today we're going over my track Attack Pattern Delta, which I recently released on SoundCloud, and I'm going to go over how it came about, where I started with it, and what direction I took it in. Normally when I start a track, I start with the drop, or the most energetic part of the song, the chorus, the hook. So in this case, I started with a simple drum pattern, kind of drum and bass, and a single bass line, and from there I kind of molded it into a whole song. So let me just go ahead and highlight and show you the drop. And I was kind of going for a little bit of a modern, like almost poppier drum and bass sound, a little bit more mainstream. So I crafted myself a bass in Massive, and I used drums out of Steven Slate Platinum Package for Contact. I'm a huge fan of those live drums. They have a great sound, and once you go in and compress them, you kind of get that over-the-top compressed sound that you usually get from a sample pack like Vengeance, or like high-quality production sample packs. Let me see if I can just show off the drums by themselves here. So you can see it doesn't sound like your typical over-compressed loop or sample pack. It's got that live kind of sound going on. And once I had that pattern going on, I just overlapped a nice little bass, like. And that's pretty much Massive running through Harmor. I made a patch in Massive, but since Massive is kind of like overused right now, I like to take it and drop it into Harmor to add some more effects and kind of change the sound from that I don't know how to explain it, but Massive has its own sound about it. I put together the drums and the bass and layered a sub underneath it, and from that point on, I kind of already had my structure for a drop. It's going to be like all around one note with the bass line, and I needed to craft a kind of intro that fit that key. So let me go back here, and I'll play the melodic elements that I put together to kind of gel together into the drop. And like I said before, I use a lot of melodic arpeggios and little like I'm a big melody harmony kind of guy. So a lot of my music has like musical elements that are like high frequency and going around, and then those kind of drop away and make room for the bass during the drop. So you got like a big contrast between like happy high frequency melodic arpeggios, and then the drop is like very heavy, hard, low frequency bass stuff going on. And I'll go ahead and play the intro for you here. And I used a FabFilter Twin to make the chords, and it's really simple saws. Didn't do a lot to it, because when you use very simple synths and oscillators, they kind of sound like 8-bit or 16-bit or very like low-tech instruments, and I'm a big fan of that kind of sound. So I made some chords and arpeggios to kind of introduce the bass line, and I made a really cheesy lead here. I'll go ahead and play it here. And then from then on out, it's heavy, hard-hitting, massive bass with a sub layer underneath to like really give it that body, and occasional like re-spaces that slide around to like accent specific points. So I created like a kind of a re-space to play around with every once in a while, and that I think it's right here. Let's see. That one right there plays pretty much at the end of every 4 bars to go, and it kind of like breaks that monotonous rhythm that I did with the massive bass, because the massive bass is playing one note all the time, ba 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 ba. So once I had that going, I kind of arranged my intro and my breakdown and my drop, and then copied it all over to a new project. And I do this a lot. I make new versions of everything. That way I can always go back to an old version if I screw something up in the future. That's another, thing that really, really helps, because God knows so many times I've gone into something and worked at it for like 4 hours, this one sound, and ruined it. You listen to it later and you're like, what was I thinking? I went way too deep on that one sound and ruined it from like a natural sound. So let me go ahead and open up a later version of this project. As you can see, there's much more going on than there was before. I went ahead and took all my Steven Slate drums, and I bounced them out each individually so that I have more control. So that's what you see down here at the bottom. I have my drums, like that's just the kick, and then the snare drum, the hi-hat rhythms going on, and then I split all those up because when you use Steven Slate, they all come out of one channel. So I have to mute every single drum and record it so I can get all the kicks alone, and then mute everything but the snare, record it to get the snare alone. That way I can put each one of those into their own mixer inserts and do some more tweaking to get them to sound different. So I went ahead and planned out my arrangement. I knew I was going to want to go from my intro to like a breakdown to the drop, and then I knew I was going to want to go from that to another melodic breakdown. So I kind of copied my intro over and made some tweaks and some changes and added some elements to make it different from the intro but still have the same vibe. Once I had my drop kind of like formulated, I decided that I was going to do my breakdown, and my breakdown was going to lead to a kind of I almost don't know how to explain it, like a beatdown section where it's just the drums and the chords and no bass line yet, and then right back into the drop, wasting no time. But on my breakdown, I knew I wanted to do some kind of like different lead progression, some kind of different melodies than I had in the beginning. So I copied everything over and recreated them. And here you can really hear the 8-bit influence. A little bit of filtering to change the energy. And then instead of going directly into the drop like one would expect, I did another, like what I called the beatdown, I guess, which is just kind of like, it gives you the sense that there's all this energy, but it's not happening just yet. Like I didn't release the bass yet, like, and for my second drop, a lot of what I did was rearrange the rhythms of the bass lines. Like my respace comes in at different points, and my main pulsing bass is still the focus of the song, but by rearranging the way it comes up and the rhythms, that it interplays with the it kind of has a different sound to it. And that was pretty much the bulk of the work for the song was the drops. And that's one of the reasons I start with the drops, because, I mean, it's the focus of the song is wherever the most energy is. So that's your hook in rap music or in pop music or chorus, or your drop in dance music. and from there, it's really easy to chip elements away to reduce the energy rather than, start from a low point in the song, like the intro, and then you have to work up the mountain as opposed to, starting at the peak and then coming down. That's pretty much my philosophy for making most bass music. I am a big fan of Massive, but at the same time, a big detractor of Massive, because since it's so overused right now, and it's pretty much the most popular bass music plugin there is, you end up with a lot of people having the samey kind of sound. Like their bass growls, like, Modern Talking. Well, don't even get me started with Modern Talking. Everybody and their mother is using it. So while I really love the way you can create sounds in it, it's never like the end of my process. Like I'll always do some post effects to it. I'm a big fan of FabFilter Saturn for distortion or saturation because it's extremely flexible. I'm a big fan of plugins like Monster Chorus, which is actually a free plugin. Flux Bittersweet for my drums is a must on almost all my productions. It's a transient enhancer. It helps your drums to really, really, really punch through in the mix. I'm a huge fan of pretty much every FabFilter plugin, not just Saturn, because FabFilter has this kind of like magical ability to be pushed to the maximum without sounding bad. That goes for their EQ and their compressor. As far as instrumentation is concerned, a lot of the time when I'm sketching ideas out, I'll grab Nexus because it's fast, it's easy. You want a lead sound, you just grab Nexus, pick a lead, and go with it. And then later on, I will sometimes pull that out and replace it with a different instrument because I like to work fast. Sometimes I do what are called like noodling sessions, where instead of like thinking I'm gonna make a song, I'll just spend 2 or 3 hours on one bass patch and like making it my own. And in those situations, I don't use presets. From those, I start blank and work my way up from there. And then I save that patch so that I can use it later in a song. I use FL Studio, and I'm actually on FL Studio 10. I own FL Studio 11, but I don't like it. There's something about the change of the font and the flat graphics that makes it hard for me to work in, because I'm so used to the way it looks, because I've been using FL for so very long. I think one of the most important parts of using FL Studio is creating a template for yourself, because in FL Studio you can route anything to anything. Anything from a sequencer can go to any track in the mixer, can go to any track in the sequencer. So I spent some time, about 10-15 minutes, creating myself a template where all my routing is already pre-made, so I never have to worry about that when I open up a project. For my own personal mastering process, it's kind of hard to explain because it's constantly changing, constantly learning new things and new ways to do these things. But lately, I use C4, which is a multi-bus compressor by Waves, and I process, my sub frequencies, my bass frequencies, my mids, and my highs, and I put a light compressor on them with a slow attack and release, just to do a little bit of shaving off of dynamic range to make things a little like more squished for the limiter, so that the limiter doesn't have to work as hard. And then following C4 will be Pro L, which is FabFilter's limiter, and I highly recommend it. It's extremely powerful. And from then on, if I need to squeeze a little bit more loudness out of it, I'll use L2 or L3, depending on the content. And that's pretty much it. I aim for about -8 to -6 RMS, just to stay competitively loud, because most dance music nowadays is at -6 RMS, around there, and it's really overcompressed. It's more than I would like, because I'm a big fan of dynamic range, but you gotta compete, it's part of the loudness wars. I think it's important to have a system for yourself It's important to have like a template to move fast. It's important to have like a kind of a method for what you want to do, because if you don't, you end up noodling around and making a sound in a song for 6 hours and never finishing the song. Or you end up with loopitis, which is, you end up making a 16-bar loop and the song never progresses from that point on. That happens to a lot of producers. So kind of having the end in mind when you start a project is important for me.